Alright, what is going on, everybody? Today, we're out here enjoying the beautiful weather at the park with Devin. Say what up, Dev. So today we're here because I'm going to show you guys how I focus while I'm shooting on a gimbal. So if you don't know me, I'm a huge fan of shooting on these old vintage lenses that do not have autofocus capabilities. But even if I am shooting on a lens with autofocus, 99% of the time I'm shooting in manual focus, and I think it's very important for everybody to know how to shoot in manual focus, especially when you're on something like a gimbal or a glide cam, some sort of stabilizer. Even if your camera has really great autofocus like this Sony a7 III, not all the time you want your camera to be, get the f out of here. Not all the time you want your camera to be the one making the decision of what's in focus and what's not in focus. You should be making the decision of what's in focus and what's not in focus. So with that being said, the technique that I use to focus while I'm shooting on a gimbal is actually pretty simple, and we really only have to understand how the lens focuses. So if I come into you guys here, Dev, can you see this?
Yep.
You can see that on top of the lens, there's all these markings that show a bunch of numbers. These numbers here on top of the focus barrel indicate where your focus is set to. So for instance, right there is 1.5 meters or 5 feet. If you're shooting on a lens that's focused by wire, I know that you can pull up the distance meter on the back of your camera.
Really?
Yeah. You didn't know that?
No.
Okay. So to make this easier to understand, I have a photo of Evan right here, as you guys can see. So here is Evan. Here is the camera. My camera's on a gimbal. Let's say I want to get a tracking shot of Evan, either a forward tracking or a reverse tracking shot. What I need to do is make sure that my lens is set to the proper distance that it is away from Evan. So for the sake of this video, let's say that my camera and Evan are 10 feet away. I'm going to set the focus on the lens to 10 feet, and I'm going to stand 10 feet away from Evan. And as Evan moves, I'm going to make sure that my camera stays 10 feet away from Evan the entire time. And what that is going to do is make sure that we're on the same focus plane and that we're not missing focus. If I was to move closer to Evan and my lens is still set at 10 feet, Evan is now going to be out of focus. If I move farther away from Evan, same rules apply. Evan is now going to be out of focus. So I hope that made sense and you guys actually understood that little diagram that I just showed you. All right guys, so I currently have my camera set up on my GlideCam HD 4000. Now I know I said I'm going to show you guys how I focus on a gimbal, and I know this isn't a gimbal, this is a GlideCam, but technically it's still a gimbal, it's a stabilizer. This is just the stabilizer that I prefer to use over a gimbal. Gimbals are just a bit too robotic for my look. I really like how the GlideCam makes your footage look a bit more organic, just feels more natural to me, so I prefer to use a GlideCam over a gimbal. So the setup that I'm rolling with here is the Sony a7 III. I have my Canon FD 24mm f2 on here, and I'm shooting right now at f2. When you're focusing on a gimbal, your lens aperture is going to play a huge part in actually keeping your subjects in focus. So if you're shooting at a shallower depth of field like f2, it's going to be much harder for you to keep your subject in focus, and you'll see what I'm saying in just a second. Like I was saying before, with keeping the same distance between you and your subject, right now me and Devin are about 4.5 feet away from each other, and as you can see on this camera right here, we're about 4.5 feet away. So I'm going to set the distance on my lens to 4.5 feet to make sure that Devin's in focus. And now, as long as we just walk down the same line and I maintain that distance between me and Devin, he should stay in focus the entire time. So, you ready, Dev? All right, so now that we are walking, I'm just trying to focus on maintaining that distance away from Devin to stay on that same focus plane. As you can see, he stayed in focus the entire time. He's currently still in focus. Now, let's say, Dev, you can go ahead and start walking again. Let's say me and Devin are walking and I stop paying attention and I start drifting away from Devin. Well, he quickly becomes out of focus because I'm shooting at f2. Same thing if I was to get closer to him, he's still out of focus because I'm shooting at such a low aperture. Ready, Dev? We can turn back around. If I'm too close to Devin, he's still out of focus, but if I back up and get right back to that sweet spot of about 4.5 feet, he's right back in focus. All right, so typically guys, when you're shooting on a gimbal or a glide cam like myself, most of the time I'm shooting on a wider lens like this 24mm. So a little tip that I use to try to keep my subjects in focus and keep them sharper is to stop my lens down. What I'm gonna do right here is stop my lens down to 5.6. So what happens when you stop your lens down is you're creating a greater depth of field. So that way there, if I move, you know, a couple steps this way or a couple steps too close to Devin, he's still gonna maintain in somewhat focus and he's not gonna be as blurry. So now that I'm shooting at f5.6, my focus is still set to 4.5 feet, but if I move a bit farther back, Devin's still pretty sharp and he's, you know, he's kind of still in focus enough for you to get the idea that he's in focus and that's the subject. And same thing, if I was to get a little bit closer to him, he's not 100% sharp, but you get the idea that he's the focus. So stopping your lens down on a wider focal length is going to help you keep things in focus just a bit more. So typically for me, 99% of the time, if I pull out my gimbal or my glide cam, it's because I want to get a tracking shot, whether it's a sideways tracking shot like you just saw, or if I'm in front of Devin and he's walking towards me and I'm backing up this way, or if I'm walking in from behind him and he's walking the opposite way. Now, if I wanted to get some sort of parallax shot, the same rules apply. You need to make sure that you're staying the same distance away from your subject to keep him in that same plane of focus and just making sure that you're not losing that distance. So now if you want to get more of a dynamic tracking shot where your subject is constantly changing the distance between themselves and the camera, then unfortunately, you're just not gonna be able to do that using this technique. You're gonna need to use autofocus or you're gonna need to use some sort of wireless follow focus. But what you can do with this technique is let your subject fall in and out of focus, and you can actually use that to your advantage. If you're trying to introduce a character to a scene, but you don't want the audience to know exactly who they are, just at first, you can have them slowly walk into focus and reveal who they are. Or, you know, you can just use it as more of a creative choice to let your subject constantly fall in and out of focus. It can create and portray a bit of a different mood if you use it that way. Some of you are probably just saying, Mako, why don't you just use a wireless follow focus so you can get those more dynamic shots? Or why don't you just use a lens with autofocus? I don't want to use a wireless follow focus because it just adds another thing that I have to think about and worry about while I'm out shooting. It's another piece that I have to set up and I just don't want to deal with it. I'd much rather just be run and gun, focus this way, keeps my mind open and clear and I can just focus on being creative and getting the shots that I need to get. I also don't just want to slap a lens with autofocus on this camera. Even though the autofocus on the A7 III is very good, I'm a huge fan of shooting on these old vintage lenses. They just add so much character and flavor and texture to your image that I'd much prefer to shoot on something like this than a very sharp photo lens. All right, so now the next shot that you're probably gonna use a gimbal for is to get some sort of establishing shot to show your audience where you actually are. 99% of the time, you're gonna be shooting on a wide angle, like a 24mm or even wider, to showcase this entire scene. Now, shooting on these wider angle lenses, the depth of field is actually much deeper. Getting a shot like this in manual focus is much easier. All you have to do is just stop your lens down to about f8, f11, f5.6, depending on the lighting. Set the lens to infinity focus and just get your shot. All right, guys, so hopefully this video helped you understand how I focus on a gimbal without using a wireless follow focus or autofocus. So like I said, the technique was pretty simple. You just gotta make sure that you're maintaining the same distance between your subject and your camera. I can't stress it enough, guys, just maintain the distance. That's it, maintain the same distance and you'll be good. I also just wanna give a huge shout out to my boy Devin, because he's the absolute man and he's always helping me out create these videos. So make sure you go subscribe to his channel, follow him on Instagram, show him some love. And if you guys like the damn video, make sure to hit the thumbs up button down below. If you're not subscribed, consider it. I'm not gonna force you. I'm not gonna tell you to smash it, hit it, jump on it. If you wanna subscribe, subscribe. It's that simple. If you didn't like the video, make sure to drop a comment. Let me know why you didn't like it. If this was confusing, if this didn't make sense, you know, maybe I can better explain it to you on a more personal level, or I can just make another video when I figure out how to make a better video. But with that being said, guys, we're all done here. I'm out. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.